You're live now.
Thank you. I would like to welcome our city council to our first governance workshop meeting of Monday, January 24th, 2022. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time. Persons who wish to do so are invited to view the meeting. It's on the website right now if anybody would like to see it. And our agenda tonight, I'd like it to be, I'd like us to kind of relax the structure of the meeting. I want this to be a meeting where no question is a dumb question. I want us all to make sure that we are sharing the floor. A lot of us have a lot of institutional knowledge and we're going to want to really talk about it, but let's try to stay best as possible present to trying to solve the governance questions we want people to understand today. I also want to make sure that people are relaxed, and the only motion that we should really be making is to adjourn at the end of the meeting. So what I'd like to do right now is start off by asking Chip Payson, who is our chief counsel. He's going to cover some important matters, and then after Chip is done, we can ask him questions at any time. But after he's done, then we'll get back to our agenda that's in front of us. So Chip, we're excited to have you here, and if you'd introduce yourself to all of us and talk about the issues that we asked you to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
You're good.
Okay. Most of you know me, but those of you who are new and who I have not had a chance to meet yet, my name's Chip Payson and I'm the city's general counsel. The council president asked me to briefly discuss a few things with you tonight, specifically the public records law and the open meeting law. I know this is a little dry, but it's important. So there are two documents that I think were distributed to you, hopefully, one on each subject. If you haven't gotten them, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to send them to you. They're not statutes per se, they are explanatory, and I think they're fairly easy to follow, and they're good resources to keep around if you have any questions. But obviously, I am here. Krishna Basu, my assistant general counsel, is also available. Kathy Lane is our paralegal. So if you have any specific questions, you can always reach out to us directly. The Massachusetts Public Records Law provides each person with the right to access public information. This right of access includes the right to inspect, copy, or have a copy of records provided upon the payment of a reasonable fee, if any. This law is not the FOIA law. FOIA stands for the Freedom of Information Act, and that's a federal law. The Freedom of Information Act allows you and me to access federal records from federal entities, not state entities. For citizen access to state records, we have the Public Records Law. And the Public Records Law broadly defines public records to include all books, papers, maps, photographs, recorded tapes, financial statements, statistical tabulations, or other documentary material or data, regardless of physical form or characteristics, made or received by any officer or employee of any Massachusetts governmental entity. It's neither medium nor location specific. And by that, I mean, it doesn't matter where you are when you receive it or send it, or what you use to receive or send it. And it covers all of city government. We, the city, are required by law to respond and provide a requester with the relevant documents within 10 business days of the submission of a public records request. The city clerk, working with the legal department, serves as the city's records access officer, and as such is in charge of all compilations of public records and responses. As I stated before, the definition of public record is very broad. It includes any record regardless of physical form or characteristics made or received by any officer or employee. This means, for example, that if you use your personal email for your work as a city councilor, or if you use Facebook Messenger to communicate with constituents, or if you have notes and files that you created and or used in your role as a city councilor at your house, all of those things are subject to the public records law. If a specific request comes in, you may be required to search all of those areas, your email, your Facebook Messenger, your files, your paper files, to satisfy a public records request. So one way I think to streamline this, and the president and I talked about this as well, is to try to get in the habit of pushing all of your written communications to your city email address. If somebody sends something to your private email or texts you, ask them to send the same to your city email address or forward it to your city email address and respond from there. That way, everything is captured on your work email and it becomes easier and less invasive for us to conduct a search of records. In that case, and what we typically do is when we receive a public records request, we'll reach out to the IT department, give them some search terms to try to satisfy the request, and then they will do an email search of all city email addresses. So it's less invasive for us to have to hound you to try to have you look in all these different areas where you think you might have had a communication, and then you'd have to print it and get it over to us if you just get in the habit of trying to use your email as much as you can. It's important to note, however, that the mandatory disclosure of public records only applies to information that is in the custody of the governmental entity and its agents at the time the request is received. There's no obligation to create a record for the requester or to honor prospective requests. Sometimes we've received a request that says, please let me know each month moving forward when this list is updated. We don't have any obligation to do that. One last point on public records requests. If a constituent approaches you and asks you to submit one for them, we would ask that you ask them to submit it for themselves. This allows the city to accurately log who's looking for what information. And the person who submits a public records request will get the same information that you as a city councilor will get. But also of note is that a lot of times these public records requests take a lot of staff time to compile them, and we're allowed under the law to charge for that time. And if you as a city councilor submit a public records request on behalf of a constituent, the city is likely not going to charge you for all of the work that goes into compiling that request, even though we are allowed to under the law. So that's just I just glossed over the public records law. Like I said, there is a guide put forward by the Secretary of the Commonwealth. I think it's been circulated. If not, just let me know. I'm happy to email it to you. But let me talk just briefly about the open meeting law. While there's no comprehensive, sorry.
Can we just pause for a second?
Yep.
Councilors, do any of you have any questions to Chip on the public records matter? Council Worthley.
Chip, thank you for your information here. You said two things. You said that the request for information would be for things that are in the city's possession at the time of the request. Is that
Yes,
correct? But
correct.
you also said if you have notes and files at home on different city issues. So I have a little notebook with just notes right here. It's nothing much. That's in my possession, but that's not.
No, you're a city officer, so that's technically in the city's possession. That's city work product. So
My
it's
hand-
it's not physically in City Hall, but it's in the possession of a city employee. So that's where it flows down into areas where people naturally don't think that it does, and that's where it becomes a little bit cumbersome.
Yeah, there's nothing nefarious about my notes. It's my to-do list basically, but it would be impossible for me to, if I was ever subjected to call every single, call this person back. Every place I have a note in my house would count as something that would be under that jurisdiction. That seems just very cumbersome.
It is, but that's the law, and you've got to make a reasonable effort. I mean, you don't, have to kill yourself trying to find everything, but in doing your job, you probably have a sense of where certain things are. I mean, you don't know exactly, but if a request comes in, you do your best to try to find what you can and you turn it over, and then we move on.
So
That help?
Yeah, so we are part of the in the city's possession.
You
Our
are.
cities. Okay,
Absolutely.
good to know.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm
Any
good.
other questions, counselors?
Hello.
Tony?
Tony. Hey, Chip, just a couple of questions. So I used to, when I was on the school committee, I used my own laptop and this time I knew better and decided to just keep everything on the Chromebook. But I do, for the purpose of these Zoom meetings, to have a screen in front of me, I do forward agendas and packets to my email. Would that count as, there's nothing on it as far as deliberation, thoughts, or anything? It's just strictly so that I can see would that expose then my personal computer?
No, I would argue that it doesn't. And I know that in terms of using personal cell phones to conduct business, I'm of the position to defend against access to any of that kind of stuff. In your particular situation where you're only using your computer as essentially a microphone and a camera, that does not allow anybody to dip down beyond that to whatever personal data you might have on that computer.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yep, it did. Oh yeah, it answered it completely. You also brought up cell phones. I also this time decided to get a separate cell phone number, and my phone allows 2 numbers to be on it.
Mhm.
Now, and of course, in the time of text, we do have written communications between parties, and the emails come in on my phone also. Does that mean that then my phone, all my personal stuff that's also on my phone is then accessible, or is it just the city business that's accessible?
I would argue, and I believe, that it's just the city information that's on the phone. And I would fight that tooth and nail if we were ever challenged on that. And we have never been challenged on it throughout all of the time, the 7 years I've been here, and the roller coaster ride of some of the issues that we've been through regarding cell phones. That's never become an issue where we have to fight very hard. People usually understand that most people don't walk around with 2 cell phones anymore. So
Right.
I think
Yeah,
that
great. You could put both numbers on the same phone. I was thrilled with that.
yeah, and I think you've taken a good precaution. I think that's a wise thing to do, because you've been through this before and you know where it can bite you.
Yeah, and also, aren't public records requests, they can't be all encompassing. They can't say, give me everything from 2022. They have to have a target.
They've got to be reasonably specific. And what and Joanne knows this, what happens when we get one that comes in that either we don't understand or it's overbroad, we'll often reach back out to the person and try to clarify and have a conversation and say, hey, look, what are you looking for? We can't give you every email that the city ever sent from July 1st of 2019 through July 1st of 2020. That's just overbroad.
All right, great, thanks. That's all I got.
Jason?
I'm assuming that text to a constituent would count as a public document,
They do.
regardless of what the content of that is. Just obviously it has to be on city business.
If it's on city business, yes. I mean, look, you obviously, everyone on this Zoom have relationships that predate becoming a city councilor. So, everyone here is smart enough to say, okay, when I'm talking to this person, that's a personal conversation. We've known each other for 30 years. That doesn't have to do with me as being a city councilor. And then there are those conversations that probably are dealing with city business or your role as a city councilor. And that's the stuff that's more that's important.
Relevant. Okay.
Yeah.
So Chip, when we are using a text message just to tell counselors about collecting money for someone's birthday, or, just a matter of just a reminder that a meeting is coming up, is that problematic, as long as it's just clearly some details of a meeting or collecting
Well,
money?
I'm going to talk about deliberations in the open meeting law section, but that scheduling type of stuff is not necessarily problematic.
Okay,
Is that a public record? Yes. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
you're doing it with a group of folks who are all on the city council. If you were doing it with 20 people and 5 of them happen to be your fellow counselors, dealing with a friend of yours 100th birthday, then probably not city business, right?
Okay. Yep, thank you. And Joanne, can you just tell us what the going rate is right now for people that are asking for public records?
It's $25 per hour. The first 2 hours are free per the Mass General Law. And anything after that, we do a fair cost estimate, and it's $25 per hour. And we kind of calculate how many hours that it might take us to find the information they're looking for. And if they want paper copies, it's 5 cents per page. If not, we try to do everything electronically.
And just remember that what Joe just said is that it's capped at $25 an hour. You know that people, if you reduce their salaries down to an hourly rate, would probably be much more than $25. But regardless of whoever's doing it, we can't charge by law any more than $25 an hour for that staffer.
Thank you.
And
Any other
there's-
questions?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say if there's, we can charge for oversized maps, I believe, and also like if we have to send something out to be copied, like an oversized map that we don't have the capability of giving them, I believe there's a $3 charge for maps too.
Okay, thank you.
Good
So,
question.
go ahead.
If someone sends me an email to my personal email regarding an issue, am I obligated to send that to my city email and or fellow counselors?
No,
Okay,
but that is a public record.
okay,
So if that person's name is Jane Smith and we get a public records request for all emails sent to counselors from Jane Smith, we will come to you and say, and ask you that, and you will have to go and search for anything that you might have in your personal email, print it, and give it to us.
okay, thank you.
Great. These are great questions. Any more questions before we move on to open meeting? All right, let's continue. Thanks, Chip.
Sure. So the open meeting law. So while there's no comprehensive list of public bodies, any multi-member board, commission, committee, or subcommittee, and this includes the city council, within the executive or legislative branches of city government, if established to serve a public purpose, is subject to the open meeting law. All meetings of a public body must be held in an open meeting when the body is deliberating. And we just talked a little bit about this in the president's example of texts. The open meeting law defines deliberation as an oral or written communication through any medium, including electronic mail, between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. Note that the expression of an opinion on matters within the body's jurisdiction to a quorum of a public body is a deliberation, even if no other public body member responds. And that's important to remember. If you voice your opinion to a quorum of the city council and nobody responds, that still could be a violation of the open meeting law. And that's the default position of the law. All deliberations must be held in open session so the public can hear what's being said, follow it, and participate. The law provides 10 specific purposes in which an executive session may be held and emphasizes that these are the only reasons for which a public body may enter an executive session. If you do not meet one of those purposes, you cannot go into executive session, because executive session, as most folks know, is basically a secret meeting. It's a meeting that the public's not allowed to view. Oftentimes we withhold the minutes until the matter is done and then the minutes are released. So the law has created 10 exceptions under which a public body can go into executive session, and absent qualifying for one of those, it has to be an open meeting. And those 10 purposes are in the Attorney General's guide that I think has been circulated to you. If not, again, let me know and I can send it over. There are 5 exceptions to the definition of a meeting under open meeting law. Remember, it has to be a meeting that qualifies in order to be an open meeting. 5 exceptions that are not a meeting. Members of a public body may conduct an on-site inspection of a project or program. However, they may not deliberate at such gatherings. That's the first one. The second one, members of a public body may attend a conference, training program, or event. However, they may not deliberate at such gatherings. For example, the Mass Municipal Association has their annual meeting. If a quorum of the city council goes, that's not an open meeting law violation. Number 3, members of a public body may attend a meeting of another public body, provided that they communicate only by open participation. However, they may not deliberate at such gatherings. So for example, 5 members of the city council go to a school committee meeting. They communicate by standing up at the appropriate time, speaking into the microphone, but they're not talking about city business quietly amongst themselves. That's not a violation of the open meeting law. Number 4, meetings of quasi-judicial boards or commissions held solely to make decisions in an adjudicatory proceeding are not subject to the open meeting law. And 5, which we don't really have to worry about, town meetings, which are subject to other legal requirements, are not governed by the open meeting law. Except in cases of emergency, a public body must provide the public with notice of its meeting 48 hours in advance, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. Meeting notices must be posted in a legible, easily understandable format, contain the date, time, and place of the meeting, and list all topics that the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting. And obviously, for the city council's purpose, Joanne and her staff are very good. They handle all of that for you, but it's helpful for you to know those requirements. Under the open meeting law, the public is permitted to attend meetings of public bodies, but is excluded from an executive session that is called for a valid purpose listed in the law. While the public may attend, a person may not address, while the public may attend an open meeting, a person may not address the public body without the permission of the chair. If the person disrupts the meeting, then the chair may issue a clear warning for them to stop. If they don't stop, the chair may order the person to leave the meeting. If the person doesn't leave, the chair may authorize the police to remove the person. If there isn't any police there, or if the disruption continues, the chair may recess the meeting and call the police to come and remove the person who's being disruptive, or adjourn the meeting and reschedule it for another date with police in attendance to keep order. Although public participation is entirely within the chair's discretion, the Attorney General encourages public bodies to allow as much public participation as time permits. If the chair allows for public comment, each person must be treated equally and allowed equal time. If the public comment period is closed and another member of the public wishes to be heard, I would advise, and we have had a lawsuit of which this came into play, I would advise that the chair reopen the public portion to allow that person to speak, as opposed to refusing and then risking litigation. The type of public comment that I just discussed is separate and apart from a public hearing. Public comment generally is at the discretion of the chair. But a public hearing is different. The law often explicitly allows for public comment at a public hearing, and the chair has no discretion other than to set the time for each side to speak and requires civility during comment. Public bodies are required to create and maintain accurate minutes of all meetings, including executive sessions, and do so in a timely manner. Timely manner is considered to be within the next 3 public body meetings or 30 days from the date of the meeting, whichever is later. Attorney General encourages minutes to be approved at a public body's next meeting whenever possible. Public bodies are not required to disclose the minutes, notes, or other materials used in an executive session if the disclosure of these records may defeat the lawful purposes of the executive session. This allows us to withhold that information if, for example, the city council goes in and talks in executive session about ongoing litigation. We don't turn around then and release those minutes until that litigation is concluded. A violation of the open meeting law can carry a fine of up to $1,000 for each intentional violation. And an intentional violation is an act or omission by a public body or public body member in knowingly violating the open meeting law. So since I've been here in 7 years, I think we've only had 1 open meeting law violation, and it was in the first couple of years that I got here. And I had to address it with the council in an open meeting, and the council, I think, had to make a motion and vote to correct the matter. See here. So what I just outlined is the non-COVID, for lack of a better term, requirement for open meetings. So as you know, when the COVID epidemic began, the governor declared a state of emergency on March 10th, 2020. On March 12th, 2020, he issued an order suspending the open meeting law and authorizing remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body until the termination of the state of emergency. On May 28th, 2021, he issued an order terminating the state of emergency effective June 15th. Shortly thereafter, on June 16th, the legislature is always a dollar short. They finally passed and the governor signed Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and that allowed remote meetings of public bodies until April 1st, 2022. So that means, absent action by the governor or the legislature, city council and boards, commissions, and committees in the city must return to an in-person meeting format on April 1st, 2022.
Fitting.
Now, Joanne sent around a bill in the legislature that's being considered to extend that to July 1st, 2022. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that passed. The question is going to be the allowance of hybrid meetings. I think just on the face of it, that hybrid meetings where the body meets in person, people can come and attend, but also can view and participate remotely, would qualify. I think that those would be fine. What's going to happen April 1st, absent any change, is that the city council will have to meet in person and have to allow the public to come and attend those meetings in person. That concludes my remarks, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So let's, Scott, you haven't spoken yet. Oh, can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Good evening, Chip. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Yes,
I don't
Counselor.
want to distract you by a morass, but could you just comment generally on standards for elected officials like ourselves in discussion with the challenges of social media like Facebook?
I mean, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I think are important mediums for citizens and constituents to get information I understand elected officials wanting to use those and the benefits of using those. When you use those mediums, that is a public record. So that's the first thing. It's not confidential. It will have to be produced if there's a public records request or a lawsuit. But it's also hard. It's also easy to get carried away sometimes on those mediums and say something that perhaps you may think would be confidential, and it is in fact not confidential. So it's, being cautious and thinking, the old adage, if I type this and it appears on the front page of the Gloucester Daily Times tomorrow, would that be okay? And thinking that before you type something is probably a beneficial thing to do. Does that kind of answer what you're thinking, Counselor?
That too, that is also about deliberations between elected officials on a social platform. So instead of sharing information, we're getting off topic and talking about opinion or decision making.
That is, social media platforms are the same as deliberating through text, through email. It doesn't matter the medium. If you've got, a quorum of you guys and you're talking about an issue, whether it's Facebook Messenger or Twitter or texting or emailing or sitting in the back of a coffee shop, that's all a violation of the law.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Chip, can I just ask a follow-up question on that? What if it's not a matter at all that's in front of us? Does that matter?
I technically, could you make an argument that it doesn't? Maybe. Would you want to be in the position where you had to make that argument? Probably not. I would err on the side of caution in these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And just, if you think maybe, don't.
Okay. Thank
If you have in the past and you have no choice and we would have to defend it, that's one thing. But if everybody here is astute enough that when you go into these things, think, I don't know about this. And if your gut's telling you maybe to err on the side of caution, I always think better safe than sorry.
Right. So the rule of thumb, everyone, that I always try to use when I'm posting things on Facebook is I just post the facts. I post links of the meeting minutes, the agenda, what's coming up, and the facts. And that's basically how I've used my Ward 4 page consistently. And that way I don't get myself in any trouble with being opinionated, and everything is just factual information about process in the meetings. So, so Jason, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, two questions. One, when it comes to the issue we've got coming up in the next week or two about ward meetings, we've intentionally made sure that I'm not hosting the same ward meeting that either Val or Tracy is, but can I attend a meeting and just sit and listen to the commentary that's going on without participating? Because I'd like to hear what Ward 4 has to say, what Ward 2 has to say, but I obviously wouldn't want to be involved in the discussion. So is my attendance okay?
I presume that these are all publicly noticed meetings, correct?
That's correct.
Then there's no problem with that. You
Okay.
are not barred from attending simply because you're a city councilor. You just have some restrictions. If you're there and there are say there's 6 city councilors, one's leading the meeting, 5 are sitting in the back, and you guys are talking about something you shouldn't be, that's a problem. But you can go, and if you have a comment to make, addressing it you should address it in a public nature, right? If they ask, if whoever's leading this ward meeting says, okay, are there any comments? And you're not a member of the ward, but you're a city councilor, say, can I speak? And you speak about whatever's going on, that's an open meeting, you're fine.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Second question is with the meetings on Zoom, can we still have the cops called to take somebody out of the meeting? Is it? That's why we
Might be
get
a
their
little
address,
tricky.
right?
Zoom, and Zoom bombing creates its own set of challenges. Typically with this body in particular, some of the lesser boards and commissions really struggle because there's nobody there with the expertise to run the technology behind the meeting. But Joanne or Grace, there's usually somebody here. If this just gets out of hand, they can shut it down or they can boot somebody out. And it's unfortunately had to happen. I know that nobody likes to do that. You don't like to deny somebody their ability to speak, but they get carried away, so in that case, an officer, you've got two very capable members of the clerk staff who could handle it for you.
Still rather call the cops. All right. That's it for me.
Tony. Could you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Chip, this is concerning public meeting and public hearing. Now, sometimes a public meeting with comment can, devolve into who's ever there to put their comments, grievances, or propose, agreement into the record without the benefit of the public knowing that conversation was going to be allowed at the meeting. Do we run certain risks in how, that's managed?
I don't think so because, look, part of civic engagement is monitoring your government, right? And if there's an issue that you're concerned about, you should show up. If you don't show up and somebody else does, they have a right to speak. Just because you have a concern and you haven't shown up doesn't mean that they should not be allowed to speak. Public comment, though, usually, and you run into this a lot with special permits that are required to have a public hearing, that statutorily is different than public comment. And I think you see public comment at the committee level. Sometimes the chair opens it up to the public, sometimes they don't. That's their prerogative. I just always suggest that if they do, they've got to set some time limits and they have to strictly stand by those time limits so everybody gets an opportunity to speak and nobody's denied an opportunity.
Yeah, I'm just more thinking about, one is advertised and one is not.
Right.
No, well, not necessarily, because you've got the time in which you would have public comment is in fact advertised.
No, I'm talking about just a regular meeting that's going on, and then the chair decides to say, does any of the attendees like to comment on this? Not oral communications. I'm not talking about.
No, I know that, but that's issue driven, right?
Okay.
It's the issue, not the ability to speak, that should drive people to the event. A
Okay.
public hearing on X street versus amending the parking spaces at Y parking lot, right? So the public hearing is going to be under a different speaking parameter, but it's still that issue.
Yeah, got it.
Well,
Follow?
can I jump in there, Tony, and ask, because we
Sure,
just
no,
had
he
this experience
clarified that well for me.
at our P&D meeting, in which we opened up to city councilors to ask questions, and then opened it up to the public to ask questions, but pretty much regularly required people to stick to the questions, to stick to the issue we were dealing with it that night. And a few people veered off into whatever they were going to talk about. And I was pretty aggressive about shutting that down.
Mhm.
Again, reminding them that they were invited to ask questions and to stick to the issues that were before the council at that time.
Right.
I'm guessing that that's fairly appropriate. I mean,
That-
I don't want to be inappropriate, but
No, that's proper, because again, so you've got matter A before you. They can speak for 3 minutes on matter A. That 3 minutes doesn't entitle them to speak on matter Z.
right.
That's
Okay.
not the point of the business before you, right? So you can shut them down if they're way over here on talking about something and bring them back and say, do you have anything else to talk about the matter before us? No, okay, you're done.
And the follow-up to that would be if you open it up to council questions, must you then also open it up to public questions?
I don't think so. Because the council, the committee does the legwork, right? For the
Right,
council,
but you
does
may
the
have-
deep dive.
You may
But
have,
so, go ahead.
you may have, you may have the committee, which is obviously, we can ask questions and talk amongst ourselves. We might have other counselors at the meeting, and that's what we had the other night.
Right, but my point is that the committees are designed to do the deep dive into the issue. You got 3 members sitting on there. Now, other city councilors are gonna come often on an important issue and want to listen to that deep dive. They should be allowed to ask questions. It's just a courtesy of the city council because they're gonna have to vote on it when it gets up to full city council. Just because you allow them to do that as a courtesy doesn't mean that you have to then open it up to the public.
Okay, as long as we acknowledge that what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's not- yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right,
Yeah, because I think one of the things we always do in standing committee is we announce when we have a quorum of the full committee. And then we have to really get our antennas up to make sure that we're not deliberating because the meeting has not been posted as a meeting of the full committee. And that's when we really have to be very careful of
Full council.
allowing, just allowing for questions for clarification.
but aren't we
Right.
actually deliberating in a subcommittee meeting? I mean, that's kind of what we're there for.
Well, the
You
three
are,
of
but
us
it isn't, but it's an open meeting. It's a meeting
Yeah.
that's been properly posted, properly noticed, so you can deliberate.
That's my point, is that we're there to deliberate.
Yes.
We're there to gather information and to discuss it.
What I think the president's point is that you 3 on P and D deliberate. Other city councilors who
Don't.
are there in the audience should
Right.
probably be careful about what questions they're asking, because it's not
Yeah.
before them technically yet.
Got it, okay. That makes sense.
And then it's the purview of the chair to determine how much of audience participation that they're going to allow. Because, I mean, we've had meetings when we were doing the firing range, and we had meetings when we were doing the Veterans Elementary, East Gloucester Elementary School, where we had like 98 people on a subcommittee call. And we had one meeting that lasted 4 hours because we had like 4 different matters on the agenda. So it's sometimes subcommittees, because they're working meetings, are tough to start getting,
You bogged
hurdles
down.
in, because we'll be there until midnight, right? So
And
that's
have been.
right, exactly. Anyway, any other questions to ask Chip? Jeff, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chip. Again, thank you, Chairman Gilman. When I had my first tour of duty on the council, we would go to friendlies after meetings. Sometimes there were 5 of us. I can't say that we didn't discuss some of the things that had happened at the meeting that had already been voted on. I don't
Closing my
remember.
ears.
That's why we shut friendlies.
But if we talk about what had already been voted on, and it's, sometimes it's jovial, whatever, but it's 5 of us at friendlies, is that a violation of open meeting law?
I would err on the side of caution and probably not talk about it, because, a lot of the things that you guys do comes back before you in some way, shape, or form that may have some link to something that you've done in the past. I just,
All those agenda items back 20 years ago have been disposed of. So there's nothing that's pending from those, but
well, look, if you want to talk about, building Fuller School and the vote that the city council took on that, okay. But if you want to talk about changing a zoning amendment that you guys did 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't do that, because similar or like zoning amendments may come before you in the future. That makes sense?
so going to friendlies with 5 of us wouldn't be a violation.
No,
Just
look, I mean, could somebody see you and make a stink? Sure. But, everybody knows that Gloucester's a small city. Everybody's known each other for years. I mean, you want to try to be careful when you can, but if you end up with 5 of you at friendlies,
Okay.
I,
is-
yeah.
So now on our standing committees, 2 of us are a quorum. So does
Yeah.
that mean conversation with someone else on the standing committee, maybe not a meeting with someone else on the same standing committee should be publicized and advertised as a public meeting and would be a violation otherwise?
If you're deliberating. Again, it's the substance of what you're talking about.
And the appearance as well.
Yeah, I mean, so again, the friendlies is an appearance issue. It may not be a substantive issue, right? So if you know that you guys are talking about, playing basketball down at the Y, and you come and you grab and you talk about family and stuff like that, you have an appearance issue, but we can overcome that. If you've got two members of P&D sitting in a coffee shop, you again have an appearance issue. But as long as you aren't deliberating and talking about anything that's going to be coming before you as a city councilor or as a member of P&D, then again, it's just an appearance issue, and affidavits of what you talked about, sworn statements, just get rid of that stuff pretty quickly.
Great. Any more questions on open meeting law? Scott, did you just say something?
Frank
got
has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Frank,
Hello.
good to see you.
So question, Chip, if we are, for example, like what's going on right now with the whole zoning thing, let's say if I wanted to meet with one of the counselors to learn more about the zoning, because I have a hard time understanding it, and we meet at a bar, is that in violation or is that okay because we're just going over the information that's put in front of us?
Which bar?
Should be at the
We're
village.
definitely not Pratties. We're not going to Pratties.
Well, look, it's not a quorum.
Okay.
So you don't have a quorum of a public body. In those situations, I would suggest to you that perhaps you seek your information from city staff, if at all possible. If you feel though that like you need to meet with the president and talk about this, then, I think if you're talking just about facts and not about the president's opinion on how she's going to vote and your opinion on how you're going to vote, then the 2 of you getting together, since there's not a quorum, may be okay. But keep in mind, there are a myriad of resources. Greg Catamatori is very good at all of this kind of thing. Specific questions can come to me, my office, Bill Sanborn in the building inspector's office. So there are a bunch of different ways to get information that may not put you in a situation where it looks to people who may see you as if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing.
Okay.
So
ahead, Tracy.
so 2 counselors cannot deliberate. The way I understood what I heard was that a quorum cannot deliberate. And a quorum of us would be 5 people, right? So if
Do you
they
wanna
met
talk
at
about
friendlies afterwards, no? If they met at friendlies afterwards and there are only 4 of them, legally and technically that would be okay, or 2 people deliberating.
You want to get into serial communications?
Right, that's exactly what I just said. Go ahead.
What?
I don't think that there should be any deliberations.
Okay,
I
that's what I want to know. I
Yeah.
just want to,
I think that,
Safe.
the president talked about, putting facts out there.
Okay.
And that is your job, and that's important. But when you're talking about how you're going to vote on something and whether you should vote for something and what you liked about the proposal and what you didn't like about the proposal, and you're talking about that to another member of the city council, I think you're running a risk.
Okay.
I mean, look, it's my job to defend you if something happens and you get, there's a complaint of an open meeting law violation, and I will defend you. as creatively as I possibly can. But, you know, erring on the side of caution and some of these things oftentimes will protect you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. These are all great questions. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, Chip, particularly with, you know, a couple of very new counselors to the whole series of government. There sometimes needs to be a certain amount of mentoring that goes on. And so if you stay away from being same member of the subcommittee and don't deliberate, but just discuss procedure and interpretation. You know, the reading the zoning ordinance requires a certain amount of interpretation. Reading the budget requires, you know, it's a new language.
Sure.
So, I mean, out of necessity, and not to have all the burden fall on the president, and where other counselors have, you know, different forms of expertise, isn't that just going to be a natural thing that happens? And
I think that's a good thing. You know, as long as you look, what you laid out is a very carefully thought out system, right? You're not putting two people together who are on the same subcommittee. You're not talking about what might be considered a deliberation. You're talking about some of the other things that you guys can talk about. I think it's a great idea. I think it you know, you're a better counsel for it. I'm just trying to paint that line for you so that you know where it is, so you don't necessarily step over it. And we're all human beings, and we may step over. And it's happened in the past. That's okay. We'll get through it. But to the degree that you're able to see it coming before you do it, that makes everybody stronger and better in the long run. But your example is a great one of mentorship and how you put that together.
all right, great, thanks.
Thank you. All right, I don't see anybody else with their hands raised, so I think we're ready to move on. So Chip, you can go home and have dinner and.
Thank you. If anybody has any follow-up questions, you think about this stuff, of course, you're laying at night thinking about open meeting law like I do, and you wake up tomorrow and you want to send off a question or give me a call, I'm always available, whatever you need.
Great. And would you mind just
Okay.
sending to Joanne to send to the rest of us those two documents that you talked about just in one email? That would be great.
Yes,
All
we'll
right.
take care of it.
Excellent.
So you're really saying we should just stop having our secret meetings?
Well, I
Yeah.
could have said that at the beginning and saved everybody an hour.
Joanne, just had her hand raised. Go ahead.
I forwarded tonight those two documents.
Oh,
I
you
didn't
did?
know-
Okay.
I didn't know who had them, like probably the
Great.
former, you know, the existing city council probably had them from before, but I just forwarded them to your emails.
Thank you. I just haven't read my emails, so thank you tonight.
Thank you, Joanne.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Chip.
everybody.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Chip.
All right,
Thank
good
you,
night.
Chip.
Chip, thank
Good
you.
night.
Take care.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our agenda now. And what I'd like to do is we need to kind of budget our time because we have an hour and 15 minutes. We'd like to end this at 7:30. And I want to just go around and ask everybody for the issue that they feel most compelled to spend time with, so I can get a feeling for how we might want to juggle around and make sure that we've got the most important matters in front of us to discuss. Joanne, Grace, and Sherry, love to hear your thoughts as well, because you take the brunt of all of our questions all the time. Let's start with Sean. If you'd tell us what the area is that you think we need to spend adequate time on tonight, that would be great.
I think on procedure, again, with the meetings and how we work on them.
Okay.
A second close to that would be private roads, but we will be having a workshop. But
Okay.
maybe to talk about a little bit how we handle the meetings.
Okay.
Touch on a little bit of the Roberts rules, some information on where to find information about that, and council comments and how we work. And that would
Great.
probably be the most important thing tonight with our remainder of the time.
That's great. Thank you. So let's go to Frank. What are your thoughts, Frank?
I like what Sean said, especially the, I don't have many private roads, but I do have one big question for private road. I want to learn more about it. With the potholes procedure. And yeah, definitely procedure more. I'm reading the Robert rules and it's just, it's a lot. And sometimes I fall asleep reading it, not intentionally, but it's not super exciting. I have that one and I got a mini version and I got the real thick one too. So I got 3 copies of that Robert rules. And so it's definitely procedures for me. And, when can I interject is something I feel like is not being talked about, or things like that mostly.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Jeff, how about you?
I would just be interested in 2 areas, actually. Can a standing committee create something that hasn't come to it yet? Okay, I was in P&D years ago and we created the zoning ordinance review task force. And that became a whole body. And then their first recommendations were rejected because it wasn't formally done the right way. And I know we have ways we can advise. So just can the standing committee initiate something? That's
Okay.
one goal. And actually that's it for now. I think everyone else has covered the things we need to talk about too.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Tracy, how about you?
Procedures, I think, would help me a lot. I have
Okay.
some parking issues that I've had people come to me with, and it seems that our last meeting, I put an order in or a request into the mayor. And it seems that he shouldn't be bogged down with my constituent who can't get out of his driveway because someone's parked across the street.
Yeah.
If there's a different procedure that, he has more important things to worry about than, parking's a big deal in my ward.
Yeah.
I talked to 2 people today and then a third one tonight about
Okay.
parking issues. But I just don't, I think he has bigger things than that. If there's a different procedure that can just eliminate him, not to eliminate him, but not to bother him and just get something done.
Okay, great. Jamie, how about you?
I'm fine. The one thing, and I've mentioned this in the past, and it's just because I'm a person who, like most of us, don't have enough time in the day. Pertaining to whether it's and again, I've talked to Councilor Gilman concerning this, but I have trouble finding for instance, like tonight, finding this panelist email because it's sent out days before, and obviously the emails pile up.
Yeah.
And I've gone as far as Googling, as Councilor Gilman has mentioned. That hasn't worked. I think Councilor Grow possibly, as I recall, the last P&D got lost connection and had to find the email again. I just recall him mentioning that, but it happens to me quite frequently where I'm a few minutes late because I'm trying to find that email that has the panelist. So I don't know if there's some way where the clerk's office can send them out the day of, just so we have it ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Scott, how about you?
I have to laugh because I do what Jamie just described on a regular basis. My short-term fix is to email when I find it in advance of the meeting. When I find the email notification of a meeting, a Zoom address, I then, if I open it, then I can't find it again because it's not highlighted, but I email it to myself and at multiple email addresses so I can be sure to find it when it comes to time to log in. But I think Sean's request to the clerk's office, if they can flag it or send a reminder with a link. The link is sometimes easy to lose and it does delay the meetings. Otherwise, I would just ditto what Sean said at the very beginning. And, you know, private road repair is unfortunately a big deal for Ward 1. And I think that the public process that we're engaged in right now on the zoning amendments is generating a lot of attention and interest, and it's going to be a challenge. And we're setting an excellent precedent, but I'm afraid of the floodgate that we're opening up for doing the same process on other proposed amendments, because people don't pay attention until at the very last minute, and then suddenly they stir things up and don't understand and confuse the whole situation, and social media makes it even worse. So
Scott,
we'll carry on.
Great,
Scott,
thank
for
you.
the email, Scott, just go right over on the left and put a star next to it. And then you just go to starred, and there they all are. Jamie, do you hear that? You just star it. That's how I was panicking at first too, and then I just starred them. And on my iPhone, it's flag.
Right.
And then you just go over to the side again and say, find, you know, where the inbox is, and then there's other things go down. You go to starred, which I think is right under inbox, and it brings all those up.
And in my cheat is that I type in panelists on top of the bar on my emails. And then right off, I see two panelists. One is that premature warning from whatever that you're going to get, the panelists one. And the second is the one that you just hit the link to. So I get two, but I can pull that out right away just by typing it in. So maybe the good solution, Joanne, Grace, Sherry, is that you could take any of these three options and send it to all of us so we can be smarter with how to kind of trigger and find that document, because it's nerve-wracking if we haven't had the time. Grace has a suggestion. Go ahead. Can you go ahead?
I want to
Okay.
point out that on the city public meeting notices on the city website, gloucester-ma.gov, click on public meeting notices. When you go to the meeting, so for tonight, you would have gone to city council workshop and you clicked on that, it would give you the Zoom link. So the worst case scenario, if you can't find your email that we send you, is to just go to the website, click on that calendar item, click on the link to Zoom, and then we'll pull you in as a panelist. And you
Oh, we
get,
can raise our hand at that point.
yeah. So that is a worst case scenario. Instead of panicking, you can just go to the calendar and the link will be there.
Great. Thank you. Joanne?
So the reason that we have to send you a panelist so early is that when we set up the meeting, is to get everybody, the panelists on there. So we send it to you. Also, you get the second email that says you are invited to, and it gives you everything and to share the link. That's for IT to link up the meeting at the time, so that we'll have a recording on it. And if we do it at the last minute, we're not going to have a recording to have minutes. So I can probably, if I remember, and I'll probably make a note of this, to on the day of the meeting, resend all the panelist invites, but then you're going to get inundated with that Zoom again, that you might be confused with another meeting. So Tony's suggestion about starring it is fine. A former counselor, what she used to do is read the Zoom email for the panelists and then after mark it as unread so that they all show up when she types in unread emails. So that's another issue too. So to do like the day of the meeting to invite you as a panelist is not going to work. So that's why we have to do it like the Wednesday before the city council meeting and the Friday before the city council meeting, so IT can hook up the recording to the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Scott, go ahead. Can you unmute yourself?
Joanne, the other thing that might help us, or Grace, would also be to put the date of the particular meeting earlier in the heading or the title, so that we don't have to open it to find out which date we're talking about for which meeting. I don't know if that's practical or not, but
On the Zoom one, Or on
Either.
the, okay, the other one, the other one that I send through the Gloucester website, I do put city council meeting, such and such a date.
Date,
I-
yeah.
I do that in caps. I'm not
And-
sure if the standing committee does it, if Sherry does it or not. But we'll try to figure something out, and maybe I'll just do a reminder on the calendar for myself to probably resend the links.
Is it a
Um,
possibility to add the agenda for the meeting to that notice also, so we're not getting separate emails, or we can find them together if we're looking of the agenda as well as the meeting invite?
I can do it on the gloucesterma.gov one. The Zoom one, I don't, because the Zoom is just like an automated thing that
Okay.
once I send the panelists out, that's it. But on the one that I have IT link up the recording, I could probably attach the agenda to it. We could probably do that.
If that might be helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So who hasn't weighed in right now? Jason, go ahead.
I think the private road repair is a great topic for a future conversation, but this is a governance meeting. I think that it's going to take a lot longer to get through that issue than the next hour. That would be my comment. I think we should definitely have something with Mike Hale present so that he can answer councilors' questions, because it is such a thorny issue. But as far as the agendas for tonight is, one of the issues that I had a little trouble with was the last consent agenda. We ended up voting 2 consent agendas. I wasn't clear on what that was all about. And so I guess maybe we could just talk a little bit about the structure of the biweekly agenda and how that is put together.
Awesome. And actually Grace is going to speak to that, because after getting feedback after the last meeting, I did speak to Grace. Joanne, you were out for on vacation for a couple of days, and Grace, we have a good solution. So I think that will help a lot. So we'll make sure that we discuss that. Anyone else? Tony?
Yeah, I only weighed in on the star thing.
Okay, go ahead. You can ask a second question.
Well, that wasn't a question. It was, I agree about the private road. I think that's way too big of an issue to take up everything tonight.
Yeah.
You know, we can touch on it a little bit, but there's several things. You know, it's kind of complex, and it needs to have a full knowledge of the actual ordinance that we have now, besides everything else. I agree that, you know, talking about process is probably the best way to spend our time tonight.
Yeah.
How we actually work. And I don't know if we want to do the code of conduct and sit and vote on the redoing the civility resolution or not tonight, or just push that to
No,
another
that's
meeting.
tomorrow night.
Okay, so we don't even need to touch on that.
Nope.
So we got plenty to discuss about, you know, what, you know, in the remaining time of how we run our
Okay.
meeting.
Great. Anyone else has not participated? Grace, Joanne, Sherry, any thoughts on what things you think we need the most information on?
Well, I just want to give comment is every council and council president had a different way of doing things and how to run a meeting and how to set it up. So I'm going back to before we had unanimous consent calendars, unanimous consent agendas to vote as a whole. Everything was to be voted on separately. And I think everybody had a clear understanding of what it was. Then I think as the council got seasoned on it, they knew, okay, BNF unanimous consent calendar, we know what it is, and that we'll vote it that way. But I think some of the terms on the new counselors, they don't understand. And just like the person who calls and we say O&A, BNF, P&D, and they go, well, what does that mean? Okay, so we have to explain it to them.
Yeah.
So going back, I think maybe we might, the unanimous consent calendar is usually done when there's an issue or a matter that a council wants to put forward. that has come after the fact that we posted the agenda within the 48 hours and the packet. And that is done separately at the meeting. So that's a unanimous consent calendar. The unanimous consent agendas, that's just like voting something as a whole unless somebody wants to pull it off. So we, Sherry, Grace, and myself, you know, any feedback to make it easier for you, we can go back to not having a BNF unanimous consent agenda and voting everything separately until the council gets comfortable with the terms and the matters before them. Unanimous consent calendar, we still have to keep it the same. So we have a consent agenda, which is the agenda that's posted on Friday with the packet. A unanimous consent calendar is any matters that come afterwards. It would be an addendum to the mayor's report, a council order, or something that has to be referred out that's timely to the council. So any feedback on that, if, you know, whatever, to make it easier on everyone, we would appreciate. We have no problem with that.
Great, thank you. And Grace, would you mind just sharing? Grace is taking a parliamentary course right now as part of her city clerk certification. And she actually chatted with her teacher. So would you share with us what you shared with me this morning when I asked you about this?
So one of the questions that Councilor Gilman brought up was the Budget and Finance unanimous consent calendar. And what is happening is the Budget and Finance Committee makes their committee report, and there can be 2 or 10 or 20 motions that are being recommended from the Budget and Finance meeting for City Council to vote on. What is happening is that is being voted on as a unanimous consent calendar, but then the minutes are showing the appearance of them being voted separately by roll call vote. And what's happening with that is it was started unanimous consent for Budget and Finance. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But the problem we're running into is in order for those motions to become certificates of vote, which the auditor needs, we have to show the council voting on them. So we can either vote individual motions, which we were doing in previous years up until very recently, or we can vote them and I think it's called en bloc, where we're just voting on the committee recommendations. But that's a problem, again, with the certificates of vote, because it's giving the appearance that each motion is being voted separately when it's being voted under unanimous consent. So as I was telling Councilor Gilman, after talking with the parliamentarian that I'm working with, it is best to vote them separately for the purposes that we need those motions. We need them for certificates of vote, so they really need to be voted separately.
And when Scott was chair of BNF 3 years ago, that was the process. So
5 and 6 years ago.
okay.
I think the unanimous consent for BNF was a pretty recent, being done consistently like it was, is pretty recent.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm Jason, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
I do, just very quickly. I have no problem with unanimous consent for referral, which we do at the beginning of the meetings with oncoming things that go forward. Counselor always has the option of removing one and questioning whether or not it should be referred or whether it should be referred somewhere else. I'm of the mind, I'm agreeing with Grace that I think that when it comes to recommendations from the individual subcommittees, that we ought to be voting for them separately and individually. I mean, they don't all have to be commented on ad infinitum. You know, I mean, we can move fairly quickly through them, but I think it's helpful to have that as an option, because you may think that 9 out of 10 are fine, and you want to talk about the 10th, and somebody else wants to talk about the 7th, and somebody else wants to talk about the 6th, and suddenly we're pulling these off the agenda anyway. We might as well just run through them and get them done.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, and I talked to Scott about that this morning as well. So I think we're good with that. So I'm glad that
I'm not in for longer meetings, but I do think they should be thorough.
Yeah, great. That's awesome.
I
All right.
like to hear my voice, so it's good.
I like to hear your voice too, Scott.
Okay, so I am going to request right now that we go to our council rules and procedures that are on the city council website. So if you can put that up on the screen, it was last voted on in 2021. And I heard 4 of you that really wanted to make this the first matter of business as we look at the rest of the agenda. So can you pull that up?
This is a pretty ambitious agenda for an hour.
I know. This is, but you know what? It's odd too, because we're on Zoom, which makes, governance a little bit more challenging, because normally we'd be sitting huddled around the desk and kind of chatting. Tony, I saw your hand raised.
It was,
ahead.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because somehow I just went, because the screen changed. I have the rules in front of me. I don't need that. Can we just more trying to get through these, ask people if they have questions about them rather than going through them one by one?
Let's
So that people-
let's take a look at them and see which ones we can
People
just skip
don't
through.
understand.
Okay, yeah. So Grace, can you upload that? Or Joanne?
Can you not see my shared screen?
Yeah,
We
but
can
it's
see
not
that
open.
you're highlighting it, but you have not opened it onto the screen. So you have it. You have it on your desktop. You want to try clicking it again? Here we go. Great.
Okay.
Okay, so scroll down, and to Tony's point, let's see if we can kind of batch this.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the top, and for everyone to know, this is on the city council website. Okay, and so it's very out there for everyone to see. Talks about the time. Okay, and we've since right now voted to start at 6 during COVID. So there's something else that discusses that in this. And
Can we
regular
talk about that? Can we talk about that?
yeah, please.
I don't know what I went back and, read minutes and stuff, but I didn't really see the rationale for changing it to 6. And, this doesn't allow us to actually come home or be at home or whatever, but to have a reasonable
Yeah.
meal before
Yeah.
our city council meeting. I would much prefer to go back to 7.
Okay.
I couldn't find what the rationale was for it, just because of COVID doesn't really make any sense.
I
Plus,
think,
attendees can then also have a much better opportunity to get what's going on in their lives, settled before they have to come to a meeting.
yeah.
That's my
So,
2 cents.
okay, so actually, we're really not supposed to deliberate on change at the governance meeting. But I think, Grace and Joanne, how would you ask us to, I think that this is a good way to discuss this. Could we just get a show of hands right now, and then note that if we make this change, we have to amend this and send it back to O&A on the consent agenda? I think that would be a fair way to handle this.
I
Would
think
that
the
make
only,
sense?
I don't know about a show of hands is, without deliberation is a.
That's
is-
true.
is proper
So-
way to handle it.
Well,
So why don't we,
What do you think, this is a planning board meeting? Oh, sorry. Let's go. Just kidding.
so let's circle that's something that we need to discuss back at an O&A. Okay, I think that's helpful. And then the next item B is just talking about when the meetings are supposed to be concluded. You can read that on your own. That special meetings of the council can be called in accordance with section 2.5 of the city charter. you need to report if you're going to be delayed to the city council president and the city clerk. Or if you're going to be delayed to a standing committee, the clerk. Remote participation, that's the old remote thing that we used to have prior to Zoom, which is just people can Zoom in, not Zoom in, but they can participate remotely. And I imagine that, I mean, we have right now in front of us, I think you saw, if you've looked at the packet, I've put in a resolution to Ann Margaret and Bruce to tell them that in consistent with hybrid, what I'd like to do and what I hear the council wanting to do to support this is that we want to look at the body of the city council as a quorum to include either people that are in person and or dialing in remotely. And that would be something that would need to be considered in the new orders for hybrid. And Margaret and I had a great talk about it on Friday, and Bruce has the draft resolution. So right now, I think we have a little bit of a breathing time because
Can I?
hold on just a sec, Tony. So
on
Chip
that
said,
point, the
go
resolution.
ahead.
On the resolution that got sent to our delegation, should that have come before the council first before it went to them?
Oh, no, it is in front of the council. It's on the consent agenda.
But you already discussed it with the delegation.
Oh, I was just asking them to give me an update on what they were doing in the House and the Senate regarding this date coming up of April 1st. So I
Well,
was
that's-
not,
Okay, then I misheard what you were saying. I thought you were discussing your resolution with them.
well, I just wanted them to know that we're thinking of that. So to your point,
Oh,
yes,
we're thinking of discussing it.
no, I just let them know that I had put through a resolution because I wanted us to consider where we were going with this. And in that conversation, I got a better understanding that there was a date that they've already looked to extend. And I
Okay.
think that they do know that they are interested in, we are interested in hybrid, as is Greg. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it was just the way you put it about the council itself.
Yeah.
Wasn't quite how I was thinking of hybrid. I was thinking more of the public interaction with the council.
Okay, well,
Remote
so
That
that,
participation would rule.
yeah, so that's something we'll need to discuss as a council. Because what our council has been talking about as well is that there could be people on the council that might be immune deficient, that are concerned about getting back live, and that we wanted to create a little bit of flexibility for them to be able to Zoom in addition to the public. So-
I don't want to keep debating this, so let's just move it on.
Okay.
Or discussing it, not debate.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, no, exactly. So let's see, as we scroll through here,
This is still on remote participation, so I'm going to move down.
yeah, we don't need to go in that, we know.
Order of business.
Okay, this is helpful. So let's just pause for a second. So the order of business, we've been through this now, but this is how our agenda looks. And a lot of people are always confused when they look at our agenda because there's a massive amount of things that are on the consent agenda. And all those matters are just being referred or approved. And so you have to kind of look at the lines on the agenda and you fall back to the bottom of the line. So the first thing that we do is just refer almost all these things to subcommittee or for just communications only. And so that's how our agenda is formulated and how it looks. So that's the agenda. Any questions about that? Let's continue. I don't see everyone's faces right now, so if someone has a comment, just speak up.
So Val, question though.
Yeah,
So when we get the main agenda, that's like 150 pages.
Yeah,
Packet.
no,
So, like-
that's the packet.
That's the
The
packet.
packet, sorry, the packet. Okay, I just want to make sure, like, that's the 150 pages, like, I don't know, like, where do I
agenda-
go to start?
The
It-
agenda
it
should be
is-
the
it is
first
long.
page.
The agenda's the first page, and that one's simple. It tells us what's going on. When I did try to, dive into that packet, it's 150 pages, and then that's just information overload.
It-
We used to insist on getting it printed in paper.
Yeah, but Frank, that's a great, that's a great comment. And we've actually always looked at different processes here, and there actually are municipalities that have their agenda all online. So if you hit like an order coming up, you just hit the link and it shows the order. Or if you have to approve something, you just hit the link and you've got that information. So
Okay.
there are better ways that we can collect all of our data. But right now, the way we have it is like every piece of document that's part of what is on this consent agenda is in the packet. And that is part of the referral to the different subcommittees. Grace, I saw you raise your hand. Do you have a question?
Oh, I wanted to point out that the packets are bookmarked. So when Councilor Majorda or any councilor opens up their city council packet, depending on the web browser you're in, you'll have to fool around with it a little bit. There's like the 3 lines that you click on with the drop down, and you can view the bookmarks. So it's not just having to scroll through. Let's say you're looking for a public hearing and you're looking for the backup documentation to it. You can go right to that bookmark, click on the public hearing, and it will take you right
Okay.
there.
Thank you, Grace.
Okay,
welcome.
that's helpful. Thank you. So
If I may,
anything,
Val, I
Go
think
ahead.
one of the obstacles that we're running into is that we have our Zoom in front of us and we can't have our packet unless we have another whole different computer. I think that's one of the obstacles that I run into, is where I'm either on Zoom and fortunately I have a desktop that I can, forward my stuff to. and I
right,
can follow along on that. So I don't know if that's one of the hindrances that's happening for people, where they can't view the packet that we're actually talking about because they're on the Zoom view. If there's anything that can be done about, shortcuts that can be done to handle that. It sounds like Joanne has something.
No,
Joanne?
I was just saying it's kind of difficult even for me. I have my laptop that I host the meeting, and then after I have an iPad. So if there's a question, so I myself have to have 2 devices in order to follow the packet or the public hearing or any communication. So it's difficult because if I'm hosting the Zoom, I have to like go back and forth to my devices. So I understand where you're at. And I
My
think,
option, this is Scott, but my option usually is to print out in advance of the meeting the pages that I'm concerned about so I can reference them while I'm still on the Zoom call. But that's confusing, generating extra paper.
yeah,
That's what I do, and it's a lot of paper.
right. So I'm fortunate because I have my desktop right here. So I've got the packet right here to the
And-
left of me. And then I'm using the screen just for the Zoom call. So,
Okay.
but not everybody has that capability of having 2 screens. So,
Val, I do the same thing where for me, I think my perception is like I'm, paying attention to what everyone's talking about, but my
Yeah.
eyes are not towards the camera. My eyes are towards I'm writing notes or looking at the agenda or the packet. So
Yeah.
like right now I'm looking at my writing notes, and I don't want people to think I'm not paying attention, but like I have to do both, listen and write notes and look at the agenda at the same time.
Do what
Right.
you need to do your job. Don't worry about the perception.
Perception? Okay.
I mean,
Well,
unless
thanks.
you're in this,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. Or if you're talking to somebody on a cell phone call and all of a sudden someone's saying something serious and you're like laughing or something, you know, I mean, but if you're clearly looking for the information, Frank, I think that that's definitely reasonable.
Okay.
Because I've been writing notes too, so.
Yeah, and there's no simple solution for this. I mean, unless, I hate to say it, is we print out a packet for you, and then we got away from that. And that's why we went on the city's website and had iPads or Chromebooks for everyone.
Right.
Well,
I
even
might
with
just-
the packet, I would still be looking down or up or wherever I placed a note. So I'm okay with the dual screens as long as you guys are aware of what's going on and I'm not, you know, doing
And,
anything that I'm
you
not
know,
supposed to be doing.
and Frank, the bulk of the material in a packet is information to look at before the meeting.
Right.
Right. And the first 2/3 of the packet, 180 pages, whatever, probably up until about 120 is just all factual information that supports all the things on the consent agenda that is being referred. So you're just kind of scanning that. A lot of there's information from the mayor's report, and you're just kind of looking at that. And then the most important documents that I always think in the packet are the minutes that we approve in the consent agenda, because you want to review the minutes, particularly if you weren't in some of those subcommittees. You want to read those minutes. So that's really important, in my
Okay.
opinion.
The longest items in these agendas are typically the necessary exhibits that are posted relating to grant applications, where you get all the boilerplate from the fire department or the police chief or the community development for accepting grants, and they legally have to present, you know, tens and tens and tens of pages of background. So that's a lot of part which you can skip over. The other comment I would make is that only 2 years ago, the city council passed a resolution really discouraging personal use of iPhones during city council meetings because we were concerned that people were texting each other or deliberating on the side or talking with constituents during a city council meeting, which was obviously rude to the public. That's probably still in place, but because of COVID and Zoom, we've moved on to a new generation where that's not a primary concern the way it used to be 2 or 3 years ago.
Right. So let's just go through the agenda procedure, because this is really important. Part A.
Val, can I say one thing?
Go, Jamie.
Yeah, Frank, just so you know, you're not accountable to any of us. You're accountable to your constituents. Do what you want and what you need to do. Thanks.
Thank you.
So in terms of the agenda, all matters to be presented at regular city council meetings shall be filed timely with the clerk's office no later than 4 p.m. on Wednesday preceding the Tuesday city council meeting. And it must be received in accordance with the timelines prescribed as open meeting laws, or the matter will be held over to the next regularly scheduled city council meetings. Emergencies, according to the city charter, are the exception here too. And then the standard committee report shall be delivered to the city council with the agenda as part of the council packets. Reports of the committee meetings held on Mondays preceding the regular city council meetings shall not be considered until the next regular meeting, except by 2/3 of the vote of the city council. Any questions about that? Okay. Everything else here is pretty much common sense. Do you want to scroll down to Rule 4? Rule 4 is the rules of public hearings. And actually, back when we used to be in live meetings, we had this on the back of the agenda, and they'd be sitting out on all the chairs in Kairos. So we'd explain the rules of the public hearing. But the public hearing is in the format in Rule 4. So you should know that. And that's an advertised public hearing, which is advertised in the newspaper, in the Gloucester Daily Times, no longer the Beacon. And Joanne, the public hearings are also still noticed on the bulletin board at City Hall, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that I had requested with Joanne and IT, and I hope that we can actually move to this, is I was hoping that the public hearings could be a link on the homepage, which would show people the upcoming public hearings and make it really easy for people to find that information. Because the fewer people that are reviewing the Gloucester Daily, the fewer people that are knowing when these public hearings are coming up, unless they're really following a matter closely. And I think that we can work on streamlining that. Any questions about any of this? Because we can scroll through this. That's just the public hearing process. Jason, shoot.
The only thing I would want to say is that I know that sometimes public hearings can get very long and repetitive, but we only allow people 3 minutes to speak, and that's not really a long period of time for most people. I kind of bristle when committees change that because of time to 2 minutes and then 1 minute and then 30 seconds and then 5 seconds show your, I mean, 3 minutes is 3 minutes. And if it means that we have to stay a little bit later, I think that that's something that we need to abide by as a general rule. I just think that it's not fair if there's a lot of people showing up to tell, the first 40 people they have 3 minutes and then the remaining 10 each get, a minute, which I've seen quite frequently at a lot of different public hearings. So I would be one that would be pretty concerned that we stick to that 3 minutes for people. We can be aggressively, firm on the deadline, without being rude, but I think that we owe it to the people to give them the opportunity to express themselves. And frankly, most people aren't used to speaking in public. It's already a challenge for people to come up in the first place. So that's just my position on that.
Yep.
Val,
Anyone, go ahead, Tony.
can I piggyback on that a little bit?
Yeah,
To
shoot.
where there was discussion about a timekeeper. And maybe if we did the timekeeper was a counselor that rotated by public meeting by, the alphabetical order like we do our.
How about the roll call vote person?
Rather than have Joanne, or the council president, not paying attention or the recording secretary, but rather one of the counselors could, and take turns round robin.
And
Also-
just at
way to keep it
2:50,
tight.
just say, you have, please wrap up. You have 10 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
one other thing, I hope that we never have a show of hands in a public hearing. I just think that's just the worst.
No, we don't like that. It's a straw poll. And one of the things that we also learned from in one of our past public hearings is that we had a great deal of people that spoke. And by the time it got to discussion and deliberations, we really should have continued the public hearing to another night in 2 weeks, because we were not prepared to really spend the time that we should have with discussion. And I think that we should always keep that in mind, that as councilors, we can always continue the public hearing if we feel like we're not ready to start deliberation and the committee report. And that's always an option that we can take if everyone
Yep.
agrees.
In that instance, Val, do we have to continue the public hearing, or can we close the public hearing and just not have the deliberation if that was, which actually would be fair to all who spoke so that their comments could be digested?
I think that's a great option, Tony, in my opinion. So so the most important thing is just making sure that we spend as diligent time talking about the matter that's in front of us and discussing it after we hear from all the people. And if it's getting too late, we should definitely consider that. So so the next thing is Rule 5. I don't think there's anything big on that. You can just scroll through that. Rules of debate. This is
Just to clarify, Val, on that last thing I brought up, I didn't mean that if we went to the 11 o'clock, shut off and there were still people to speak, that we shouldn't continue the public hearing. That's
Right.
not what I meant. I just
Right.
meant if the public hearing was basically done then, we close it, discuss it later.
Exactly. I think both of those options are possible. I'm glad you brought that up. All right, Rule 6, rules of debate. This is important. No member shall speak more than once on the same question until all other members desiring to speak have spoken. No member shall have or hold the floor for more than 3 consecutive minutes during debate on the same question. And no member shall discuss any individual or company in a derogatory manner without first notifying the parties involved. Upon notice, the matter shall be placed on the agenda for a future meeting. The constraints may be lifted by the council president for good cause or by majority roll call vote of councilors present. So any questions about any of those rules of debate?
I guess the only thing I would ask, Val, is that sometimes you have a question and then a quick follow-up question. I don't necessarily count those as 2 different questions if something needs to be clarified.
As long as the follow-up is a legitimate follow-up, because Councilor Nolan once teased me after a meeting and he said that I definitely asked 2 separate questions, and one
Yeah.
was not a follow-up. And it was just, it was one of those moments where I realized that I had to be
Right.
more.
It's just that some issues or may not be one question issues.
Yeah.
And so I think that the goal is to get the best result, and sometimes that means having more questions.
Yep, I agree. Any other comments on the rules of debate? Because that's important. Okay, manner of voting, we've gone through that already. We know that. Everything on Zoom calls still have to be roll call vote, including the motion to adjourn. Committees it discusses things that relate to the city charter, vacancy in a council position and filling the same. We don't have to go over that right now. If you could scroll down. We don't need procedure for selecting an interim mayor. We don't need the vacancies and positions of a city clerk or city auditor. Special permits. I see something there that we need to update because 1.8.3 is not included for height permits under 3.1.6B. So we need to, that's another thing that we need to amend. The minutes of city council standing committees shall only be altered or approved by the full city council at regularly scheduled meetings. So if anybody saw a mistake in a meeting that they felt was not correct, you would be able to remove those minutes from the consent agenda, and then you would speak clearly in terms of what you are adding or deleting from the minutes. So we could vote to amend the minutes. We've done that several times. Every once in a while, there might be a scrivener's error on the minutes, and that's another opportunity where we should clarify that in the public meeting. Transfers, authorizations for sign-offs. I don't think we have to go through that. Procedures for voting the annual budget. We're going to have a governance meeting with Kenny and John Dunn for the full council in February, where we can go through all the timelines for the budget and explain the budget. And that will be great. Scott and Kenny are working on the agenda right now for that. Council citations, this is kind of important. This was in our rules of procedures. If a city council citation is to be given on behalf of the entire city council, it should be signed by the entire council. If a city council objects to signing a citation, his or her name can be omitted from the signature area. And if the city council citation is to be given by one city councilor, it only has to be signed by that city councilor. The civility resolution, that needs to be updated because now we have both a civility resolution and a code of conduct. And this summary of dates just describes the last times that we updated the rules of procedure. And the last being February 9th, 2021. So having gone through this, can we get rid of this now on the screen so we can all see each other again?
Can I ask a quick question about the civility resolution?
Yep.
What, this is significantly different than the code of conduct. What was the genesis of the civility resolution and what's its purpose? Because it seems sort of overly broad in
Yeah.
its.
So can you, Grace, do you mind, or Joanne, can you kill the document so we can all look at each other?
Oh,
Oh, we're still here.
Okay, here we are. So the civility resolution, Jason, it's a good question, was developed during time where we were under pressure to consider being a sanctuary city.
mhm.
And we were looking for ways that we wanted to make sure that folks most vulnerable were protected.
Right.
And John McCarthy, who was the police chief, interim police chief at the time, along with Mayor Safathia and Donna Leet, drafted that as a way to tell our folks that are most vulnerable that we were looking out for them.
Okay.
And that was a civility resolution. And I actually was closely involved because I'm the one that kind of brought it forward to the council. And that was the history of that. The code
But
of
that
conduct-
was in opposition to actually becoming a sanctuary city, though.
It was the Mayor Safathia felt comfortable that this was a good way of she felt that we were doing what we needed to be doing to be fair and protective of the people that might be vulnerable. And
Okay.
this was her way of letting them know that. And it was unanimously approved back then. And then more recently, now that the Human Rights Commission has been in place, they felt some of the wordsmithing could be better tightened up. And like Hannah Kimberly is a writer and she chairs the Human Rights Commission. You're going to be on that commission, Jason, which is great. But what Hannah felt that there were a couple of wordsmithing things that could be tightened up, and that's what they did in May of this past year. So code of conduct is something that MMA has been talking about for years. I attended a session in June of 2020 with Chief McCarthy at the MMA conference. And the code of conducts are becoming very, very common with both select boards and city councilors throughout Massachusetts. And that's why that's how we behave to each other. And we'll be able to talk more about that tomorrow night because it's on the agenda. Tony, you have your hand.
Val, I have a question on the civility resolution.
Yeah.
I understand it was an alternative. And it all feels very good, but I don't see anything in there that actually protects anyone. There's, we have no power over the police department. It's nice to say that they're committed and taking all allegations seriously, and I believe that they do. I'm not saying they don't. It's just, there's a trans person in town who's been, verbally accosted in a grocery store several times. How does this protect them from that? I don't see any protection here for people who need it. It all sounds great, but I just don't know how it delivers. So you were there at the beginning. Was there thoughts on that, on the delivery of the protections, or?
I mean, at the time, I know former Chief McCarthy and the mayor were going around to different organizations and talking to different people that were concerned about being protected. And so there was kind of informal conversations of meeting with people. I could certainly reach out to John and the mayor a little bit more and find out exactly what they did, but there were some actions that were occurring. But I understand what you're saying. And we can, we can talk more about that tomorrow. These are documents that are up for review every year, and we're able to pause if we want to spend some more time sending them back to subcommittee to further review or to consider or to talk more about it. We're always welcome to do that. We don't have to go. It's not a carte blanche tomorrow night that we all sign it. If, we
Yeah.
as a council want to be comfortable with whatever it is that's in
I
front
was
of
just
us.
wondering if there was any accompanying things that went with this from the Human Rights Commission or anything, but that's all. Okay, no, you answered. Thanks.
But
Yeah.
can I follow up that? Who else signs this document? It's ironic tonight is the Human Rights Commission meeting. I'm missing it unfortunately. So, but
Sorry.
who else, does anyone else but the council sign this?
No, it was just us.
Maybe we should expand the signature list to include the chief of police, the mayor, the fire chief. I mean, if this is truly meant to protect citizenry, then they need to get on board with this.
So let's talk about that tomorrow night. I
Yeah.
think that's really reasonable thing to think about.
Val?
Council,
Yeah, first of all, the civility agreement came up before the Human Rights Commission.
Mhm.
When we first started working about it, as opposed to the fact of a sanctuary city. With the Human Rights Commission and a lot of other things that are going on, things have changed. It's really unfortunate there's a trans person that's getting accosted in supermarkets and stuff, because people are people and everybody should be prosecuted for doing bad things to anybody, regardless of their status.
Yeah, that was a hypothetical, Sean.
Yes, but this is definitely something that while we have the Human Rights Commission and it is a city council document, it would be nice to join, have other members of the city join with us, as us having to join with the city one as well. So I think it's an open interpretation, and council to council is something that's a working document that we can always change and look forward to broaden the future life for all residents of the city. So it's definitely something that we can work on with the Human Rights Commission. I definitely think it will change year to year. There's a lot of bad things going on, and we need to be prepared and work with all aspects of whoever's involved with it and make sure that they feel safe and protected in our city.
so
Thank you, Sean.
let's prepare a rigorous conversation tomorrow night on this topic. Great. Okay, so let's do a time check. It's 7:30. Let me just go back to this right now, and I think that we should make our commitment to wrap up in 5 minutes, if that's okay. If there's an objection to that, let me know. So let me just add a couple of things to this. Private road repair. Council Nolan and I met with the mayor and Jill Cahill for our first, we're going to be meeting with them twice a month, and we met with them last Thursday. And Jill Jill Cahill and Mayor Verga were very clear that the private road conversation would be happening with Mike Hale probably in the March timeframe. And so in the meantime, what I would really ask that you all do is you look on the website, go on Public Works under departments, and then scroll down to private road repair. And there is a link to an informational summary of private road repair that Council Nolan, Memhard, Grace, and I developed. And we had Mike Hale and Rose both proofread it. And it's a great tool. It's a tool that includes things like a listing of all the private and public roads in Gloucester in alphabetical order, which is really helpful. And it's all the steps that you need to take. And clearly the first thing that you need to do when someone talks to you about a pothole or whatever is you get them to do a C-click fix. And it might be taking a picture of the pothole or the drain or culvert or whatever it is, and you get them to upload the picture and do a C-click fix. And that brings it right to Rose, who makes a determination of what the process is. And if the feeling is that it's a private road, and that pothole, the road is in horrible condition, they'll probably say you need to go back and talk to your ward counselor about the betterment policy. And that's what happens systematically. So just for the meantime, until we are able to have that conversation with Mike Hale, which will be coming up, like I said, in March, that's the best way to handle this. And I'm trying to think what else. Oh, on that website is also the last time that Mike Hale addressed our city council. I believe it was back in 2018. So you can read those minutes of his last presentation, which, other than a couple of numbers being different, perhaps chapter 90 funds are a little bit different than they were back 3 years ago. I think they're slightly less than they used to be. I think we're closer to like 670,000 a year now for chapter 90. So that number's a little bit less, but all the content of the minutes is there for you to understand. So spend 5 minutes reading those minutes and it will be well, it will be well worth it. Councilor Nolan or Councilor Memard, we've all worked through the betterment process a couple of times in all of our wards. Do either one of you have any other things to add about that tool? Sean?
It actually does work. A lot of people normally meet you with the normal course of anger, taxes, rights, they plow my road, why don't they fix my road? There's a lot of legal reasons why roads aren't roads, and they can go back into the 1800s, 1890, where there was a reason to make a public road. So this goes back a lot longer than we've been around. The budget, which isn't actually on there, and that information, just so you know, is the total budget for pothole repair in the city of Gloucester is usually around $30,000. And that's for public roads, and then whatever they can scrape up for private roads as well. So it is a touchy subject. Mike will get with us and we can talk. But I look forward to working with all of you on this because it is important to a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, do you have anything to add?
I think Sean summarized it pretty darn well. I mean, it's clearly a hot potato item for a lot of people. It's gotten worse. There are some really bad roads in town. Some of them are desperate. And the fact of the matter is, unless something changes that on those private roads, whether they like it or not, the abutters themselves are legally responsible to maintain the road in a safe, passable manner. And it's not the city's responsibility, even if the city plows it and if there's water lines in the street, but it's the abutters' legal responsibility. And for them not to fix the potholes the way the law reads now puts them at legal risk for people suing them for damage their vehicles or their axles or whatever on potholes on those roads. So take a visit to Brightside and Beach anytime. We welcome you.
Every day I go down there, Scott.
We drive slowly, please. Drive slowly. It's one way of controlling the rate of the traffic, but it's a serious issue. And people are, as Sean said, resentful that their tax dollars seems to put some property owners in a preferential treatment if their road is designated as public versus private.
Yeah. So to our ward, thanks, Scott. So the ward counselors that are new, Tracy and Frank, reach out to either Sean, Scott, or me, and we can kind of go through that whole website with you. And until we're able to meet with Mike Hale, we can really try to help you understand it. It's a process issue. We're not deliberating out of open meeting. And we want to be able to help you with that. So, and then also a shout out to Grace, who does the whole betterment administration in the city clerk's office. So Grace is also a subject matter expert.
I work with Joanne on that.
Okay. Joanne, I'm sorry. I worked with Grace on the last, our last one in Annisquam, so. But Joanne also is a subject matter expert for sure. Anyone else have comments before we adjourn?
Just very quickly on the road
Yeah.
thing. I think, one of the things I've been thinking about, I'm sure that others have too, is that Gloucester is clearly not the only community that has issues like this.
Yeah,
And I think that maybe we should be a little bit more active about reaching out with the mayor to Ann Margaret and to Bruce and to say, look, we get it. The roads in Eastern Massachusetts stink.
yeah,
But there's got to be some way that we can, collaborate with our neighbor communities to try to find something that satisfies the need to repair what are obviously at times dangerous roads. But also, to understand that a lot of folks don't even know they live on private roads. Some roads are more aggressively traveled, Brightside and
Yeah.
Beach being two of them, where, if I were a private property owner, I'd say you can't go across my road. Well, you don't have that right. So if you don't have the right to deny access, you should have some reasonable expectation that there's a shared responsibility there and I think we need to do that legislatively at the State House.
right. And that's, and I think that became a passionate issue during the campaign. And I know Mayor Verga is definitely sensitive to these matters, as are members of our city council. So I know that Mike Hale and the city administration is also putting together a task force to look at this. So I think that we are hungry to see what else we might be able to do.
And I think Scott should lead the spearheading on this.
So the mayor's putting a task force together for road repairs?
So
Or-
under Mike Hale's leadership, and it's just to look at all of the options that we have aligned with what the law is in Massachusetts, which is that folks need to repair their own private roads. That's a law in Massachusetts.
Do we
But
know-
to Jake's point, we always have the opportunity to work closely with other municipalities. Mike Hale works all the time with his public works folks at different meetings, and they talk about this throughout the whole state. We talk about this at MMA. Regional conversations definitely help, making sure that our legislators understand that this is a huge priority.
Do we,
You know,
do,
I looked at the Chapter 90 options right now. We have 150 million right now coming into our state. And there's some opportunities for grants right now out of Chapter 90 for different things. So you can look at the MMA conference material, and Elizabeth Warren talked to us about that on Saturday morning. You can read how there's another opportunity we can take advantage with some grants that are part of a new little surge of Chapter 90. So, there are different things that we can look at, but it's a hot issue and we're all passionate about it. And it's good to see that our counselors are looking to see what we might be able to do. Tony?
Yeah, a couple of things. I just looked up the apportionment for Gloucester in 2001 was pretty much the same, $656,402. Another thing is being a veteran back of when we tried to fight the Chapter 70 war and our complete disproportionate amount of money we get for that. The other communities have to sacrifice for us to get more. So that's where it happens in the legislative pieces. You got to convince the people who are going to lose as well as the people who are going to win. I did have one more piece of information. I'm sorry to bring this up now, but the minutes, I was really surprised when I got all the motions that they were already typed up with the person making the motion, the person making the second, and the vote were already all done. That kind of concerned me because aren't we supposed to have that vote in public and not be pre-reading and have it presented in front of us already? Shouldn't it just be the motion without any of the accoutrements?
Yeah, so it's a good point, and I think we can just leave out those extra things. I think it's
Right,
just.
exactly. That's all it needs.
So I think we can just, and it's only a recommendation to a motion, and I think there might even be a statement on the top that says that it's just a recommendation. So we can always amend and do those things on the fly, but I think we can just get rid of the extra words that say an emotion by blank and seconded by
And then-
blank. And
And
it
voted
was
unanimously,
this,
you know.
how many in favor. I think we
It
can
makes
just
the meetings go so much faster, though.
You don't even need them.
That's right. We just wave it around and it's done.
So,
So,
yeah, I was just a little- I
Joanne
was a little
and Frank-
surprised.
So maybe you could just get rid of some of those filler words, because that's the outcome of what our vote is. So, but everything else.
I'm gonna suggest that as thorough as this is, there's still some issues that especially, and not to single you out, Frank and Tracy, the rest of us have had experience with amending motions and how to deal with that process. Either, ask other counselors who've gone through this process, when can I make an amendment? How do I make an amendment? You'll be told whether or not it's in order or not, but don't be afraid to ask the rest of us these procedural questions, because it can get very daunting, but you may want to amend something. And, I get frustrated when I listen to meetings, and I've done it, other boards, when they say, well, couldn't we do blah, blah, blah? And it's like, yeah, what you do is you say, I'd like to make a motion to amend this discussion, this motion, and they don't do it because they don't know the process. And, those are very important parts of getting through the meeting and getting what you want done, so that we can then discuss it and vote on it and then move on to the whole thing. So be free to, I'm happy to talk to you, and I'm sure everybody else is, that, those can be very confusing, but once you get the hang of it, then it's not so much.
Also, for clarification, I like to let you know that Chapter 70 is the money that the state gives for the schools.
Yeah.
So I just said Chapter 70 with no definition of it, but it's what the state
Yeah.
gives to each community for the schools.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna. Go ahead,
Can I go back to the roads? And there's a task force for roads with Mike Hale. Do we know who's on that task force?
Val?
No?
Yes, go, Sean.
The task force really isn't for roads. The task force is to look into what we can do for private roads with public access. So it's not necessarily sidewalks or potholes in public ways. This is more intended to look into what we can do to help with private roads for public access. So it's kind of a more of an idea of how we can look to the state to see if they can help us with some verbiage. Right now, we're only allowed to do minor repairs with Chapter 90 money. So in other words, we can't use public money on private roads with public access. So it basically is offshoots and mostly Ward 1, 4, and 5. I don't even know if there is a private road of public access in Ward 2.
I doubt it.
Yeah, so this isn't like a yay, we're gonna have a task force to fix public roads. It's a task force to look into helping people with private roads with public access. So it's a brainstorming situation right now, not a technical appointed or any real committee that's been formed yet. This is just something that's come out of discussion to try to work on situations that have been plaguing the city for the last 40 years.
Right.
Trying to come up with a compromise.
And to
So
Jason's
should
point,
there,
go ahead.
so should there be a task force for public roads?
We have a task force for public roads, and that's called the city council, and putting
Okay.
in council orders and requests to maintain public property.
Okay,
Um,
so I
so
will ask
that's
one
it.
of my fellow counselors how I would go about getting something like that on the agenda.
Not, yeah,
Putting in a council order is what.
Council
you-
order. How do
Yeah.
I do that? Okay,
So we can.
Can we
help
talk
you.
1 second about council orders too? I know I hate to bring it up.
Sure. Do we
Go
have
long.
any objections to going for another 10 minutes?
Ugh.
You know, you get a lot more, I found, you know, that you got a lot more done when you approach the administration before you put in a council order. And
Okay.
sort of you use the council order as kind of, has been quoted to me, the nuclear option.
Ooh, okay, I don't want to do that.
No, I mean, it don't, not really. I was just.
No, but
it was-
I get it.
But-
The-
and
the-
it's-
I-
You want to approach them first.
Do
and
we
give
have
Path
a
of
them-
least
request to the mayor,
resistance.
Tony, or do you, a request to the mayor, or are you talking about a council order when we want to?
Request to the
amend
mayor,
one
is
of
what-
our ordinances?
request to the mayor, I guess is
Okay.
more what I'm talking about.
But,
Yeah.
Right,
so-
right.
right, so what I'm looking for is the path of least resistance.
So,
You like that, Scott?
So typically what I will do if I feel like there needs to be a request to the mayor is I will send to the CAO or the mayor just something private in advance and just say, hey, here's a situation that I'm having. Here are some pictures. There's been an accident that's occurred in this spot 3 times in the last 3 months. And then what I do is I more officially put it in at the city council meeting and discussion.
Okay.
Sometimes those things can get serviced right away and it's not a big deal. Other times there's a queue because there are a lot of other people that are waiting and it might cost some money and time to fix it. And one of the things that administration said when we met, Sean, you can attest to this, which was a very helpful meeting, is that they're looking in terms of how they want to follow up with outstanding requests to the mayors. So they're actually thinking of a process to put in place to make sure that all of our requests systematically are looked at with department heads and their office. So this is good. This is all the stuff that's important to us. So Jason, do you have something? you
Yeah,
wanna-
keep in mind that council's requests to the mayor are different than council orders. I mean, you're right, Tony, in the sense that a council order is a collective call for action on something, as opposed to trying to get something in your ward done. I agree with Tony. It's a much more, it's an elevated thing. We would use council orders to ask for research from a city department. It's doing something that we might want to do for legislative reasons, because there's that separation. You can't just call up the DPW and say, I need you guys to do a bunch of research on blah, 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 because we want to put some ordinances together. That's where the council order would come in. It'd be more of an official request to get some research and documentation or whatever it is, but it's definitely
Okay.
different than a council request to the mayor.
Right.
Am I right? I mean, am I characterizing it incorrectly?
Yeah, so a request to the mayor is request for action of something that is beyond
Right.
our purview
Sure,
of
yeah.
amending one of our ordinances, right? Because we are the ordinance maker. The ordinance, the Gloucester Code of Ordinances is owned by the city council.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
the administration enforces it through the department heads, right? So we use a council order to come up with changes, amendments, or even matters that we feel we need an ordinance for. That comes under our purview.
Right. We could even make a council order for something for the council to do. The council order can be that we would refer to the budget and finance to come up with X, Y, Z. I don't know what we're talking about, but
Okay.
it's more of an official kind of thing.
okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
So what I'm gonna do, just in closing, is I'm gonna go through this agenda again. And I'm going to get rid of the things that we've already discussed, and I will plan another session. And what I think we'll do next time is, if you are a seasoned counselor and you don't really feel a need to attend, I think the workshop can be for people that feel like they need some more knowledge, and we'll continue on this. And we welcome anyone to be able to attend if they wish. And of course, everything will be on Zoom. So if you decide not to come that night and you want to see what we discussed, you'd be able to catch up. Does that make sense, everybody?
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'd also like to acknowledge the members of the public who are sat through our meeting this evening. Mary Ann and Patty Amaral and CK, whoever CK is, but thank them for joining us and putting up with our process meeting.
Yeah, and I saw Denise as well.
Yeah,
So,
Denise Goulart.
yeah. So is there anything else so we can adjourn? I think that this was helpful. We spent longer than we thought on some issues, but I think we covered a lot, and I love the enthusiasm and the comments and challenging of the way we've done things, because we can always do better. And that's what working together in governance can help us. So anyway, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Gilman, yes. Grow,
Yep.
Gross,
Yes. I was supposed to be last.
Counselor Marjota,
Yes.
Counselor Memhard,
Yes, thank you.
Counselor O'Neill. Yes, okay, you're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Nolan,
Yes.
Counselor O'Hara,
Yes.
Counselor Worthley.
Yes.
The yeses have it, 9 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you, Joanne and Grace, for all your
Yeah,
help.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
you
you,
tomorrow.
Joanne. Thank you.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
Good night.
Good night.